Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to PNM TV. Today we have with us Ms. Karen Inez Teixeira, former Minister of Finance under the People's National Movement Administration, and also the former Member of Parliament for W. Mayor. Mrs. Teixeira has joined us today to share with us some of her views on the 2010-2011 budget presented to us by the UNC-led and dominated coalition government. Welcome, Mrs. Teixeira.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here on PNM television.
You're welcome. So we're hearing all this talk about, Mrs. Teixeira, about the PNM government leaving the economy in shambles, in bad shape, saying that the treasury is completely empty. What say you on this topic?
Well, to be honest, I think now, Kimberly, they've moved away from that because facts are stubborn things, as one of my colleagues would have said on several occasions, and it's true. When you look at the facts, they do not support those kind of broad statements and wild accusations. I think the minister has recognized, for one, when you talk about our debt, that's something nobody wants to have too much of. He started off making some statements that our debt, we had a crisis of indebtedness, and certainly recognizes that is not true. And in fact, he was noticed at AmCham meeting a few days after those statements that we had wiggle room, and that in fact the debt situation was not a bad situation. I will be able to expand on that a little bit. But so that's the debt situation. When you look at our savings, that's another measure to determine whether you've left the economy in shambles. We have excellent savings in our what we call our Heritage and Stabilization Fund of over $13.3 billion TT. We also have in foreign exchange reserves. When you have to buy things from abroad, you want to have US currency. We have 11 or 12 months of import cover, and most countries you require just 3 months of import cover. When we look at employment level, how many people have jobs in Trinidad? When we left office, it was about 5%. Employment, we brought down inflation, and over a number of months, we had brought it down since last year. So by the time we emitted office, we had brought down inflation to about 5 or 6%. We had brought up the unemployment level was very low, our debt was very low, and our foreign exchange reserves and our savings were quite, appreciable. So that I know that the minister cannot say it, and it's important that Trinidadians recognize that when we left office, we left the economy in good shape, so that now they've passed the baton on to them, and it's their responsibility to continue the good work of the PNM.
Well, I really hope that they do so, because two issues that are also on the forefront right now is the issue of the deficit and the issue of debt. What is this fiscal deficit?
Okay, in a simple way, when you talk about a deficit, in terms of fiscal, it means that your revenues or your profits, for another word, are less than the expenditure. So you're running a business, and people can recognize that with dealing with their salary. They have more expenses than their salary covers, for whatever reason that has happened. And that's also true for a government. Governments around the world since the global financial crisis have been struggling with deficits. It's United States, Europe, all over the world with large deficits. One of the things that in terms of the budget, I think nationals and people need to understand. Minister Dukran spoke about turning around the economy. He spoke about restoring confidence, and he spoke about the deficit, closing the deficit. In other words, ensuring that we lessen our expenditure or increase our revenue. And what did he do this year? He increased the expenditure by $5 billion. $5 billion. That's the biggest budget we have ever had in this kind of environment. It's particularly worrying. But what he did not let people know is this, that when they revised the accounts, closed off the accounts for last year, when we were in office, when we closed it up, do you know what the deficit was? He's aiming for a deficit of $7.7 billion. That's what he said in his budget statement. By the time we closed the accounts, our deficit was down to $3.8 billion, and not even that. When we take out the funds that we put into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund and we deposit it, that's over 2-point-something billion. In other words, we brought down the deficit to nearly about $1 billion, and he is taking it back up to over $7 billion. He's turning around the economy, or is he turning it over? We nearly closed the deficit, and people need to know that. And he did not say that, but I will invite people to look at the review of the economy document, and they will see what I have just said.
Well, that's very informative. I mean, it's very new information for me as well. So I can only imagine what the public will do or say when they hear this.
But the other point you'd asked me about, of course, was the debt. And I did not specify the issue on the debt.
Yeah.
The debt issue is this. He said that we had a 51% debt.
Yeah.
I was able to show in an article that the debt was not 51%, but it was more 38%. You know why? He was adding to the debt. When he's adding up all our debt, he was adding something called bonds. Now, just to make it simple, the government issues bonds in order to raise money for expenditure. But the reason we did it on this occasion, because there was too much money in the system and it was pushing up our inflation rate. So we issued a bond for people to buy it. And instead of taking it and putting it back into the economy, we locked it away in accounts. So that bond debt is already accounted for. We have the money there. So you do not include that in your debt. When you take out that debt, it came down to 38.5. You know what the minister did in the budget? All of a sudden he says that the debt is 49.4. How did he reach that? When his own budget document, look at the review of the economy, Appendix 25, listeners, and you will see that his own ministry said that the debt is 38.5. You know what he did? He added into the debt something that is not normally added. And to make it very simple, the money is already accounted for, so he should not have included. So I want Trinidadians to know and Togolese to know that when we left office, most countries have debts of 70, 80%, 100%. Trinidad and Tobago needs to know that when the PNM left office, the debt was 38.5. That is a fantastic accomplishment. So when they are now in office, they have to understand that the PNM on every level left the economy in a very strong, solid position.
Thank you very much. Now, the issue of broken promises has been a mode of contention among the general public. What say you on the issue of A, the property tax, and B, the senior citizens grant that has been causing such a flurry?
Okay, well, I will just comment very quickly. On the senior citizens grant, it's embarrassing. The Prime Minister, no less than the Prime Minister, and certainly we've had many examples, Minister Amy Brown, former Minister Amy Brown, has brought to the Parliament evidence that they said that the senior citizens were going to be persons over the age of 60, not 65, so they were dropping the age, and they were putting no qualification. There was no question of financial means, unqualified. And they several times said that they had not said it. We know as a fact, because it was brought out in some audio recordings confirming it was said in the budget. There's a statement, very terse, very unclear, very vague, that persons will be getting the senior citizens grant of $3,000. The point about the broken promises is you don't tell the people and have the expectation that I am 60, I'm going to get it, and it doesn't have anything to do with my income status. That is a broken promise, and that is putting it kindly. And with regard to the property tax, I was interviewed on that several weeks before the budget, and I did not have 2020 vision on this, but I did tell the reporter at the time, Richard Lord from The Guardian, that they were not going to drop the property tax. You notice in the budget, they had about 3 sentences on it. You know why? Because I am confident that they do not know how to implement it. They said that they're going to return it back to the old rates and the old values. I just want to mention 2 things. You know what the old rates are, which are clearly, they do not clarify to the national community? It's 2 sets of rates, but guess what? 7.5% for most of us, based on the value of your property. And for people living in municipal corporations, like Port of Spain, for example, it's 10% of the value of the property. And in some places like Arima, so it's about 8%, San Fernando is 8%. So you're going to get, in a small country like Trinidad and Tobago, different rates, and all of them, except for in the case of Point Fortin, higher than what the PNM put in. We have dropped it down to 3% across the board. They are bringing it right back up, between 7 and 9. So they're not being clear. The second point, they said, they're going to do it on the old values, meaning that regardless of the percentage, if the value is low, then you're not going to pay much. And the problem with that suggestion is this. There are places like San Fernando and Arima and so on that are paying the taxes on a new valuation. The Ministry of Finance and that division did a lot of valuations all over the country. And it's provided for in the law, the Valuations Act, that you must do valuations. So what are they going to do? What is the old values they're talking about? And what are the old rates? The fact they did not speak about it much, and it had it in 3 sentences, I am confident that they did not think it out, they do not know how to implement it, and next year, you're going to see another broken promise. And you're going to understand that when they talk about old rates, and old rates, they're talking about higher rates. And when they talk about old values, they're talking about some people paying one rate and another, and I can see people taking them to court for under the Constitution for not equality of treatment. So it is clear to me, my last statement on this, in a very broad sense, a lot of ideas it took from us, but it was unclear, it was vague, it was lacking in specifics, and it is my contention that the reason for that in large part is I'm not sure that they know what they're about. And that seems to be the general reframing from the national community. And being the former Minister of Finance under the PNM administration, it seems to me all indications that they are a bit clueless, unclear about what is, and they're lacking in direction, and the direction certainly should come from the head of the cabinet, which appears not to be there. And that's my general view of what's been happening.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Teixeira, for being here with us. I really appreciate it. I hope that this information is informative to not only the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but for those around the world who are looking in, because we know that we have, been very popular lately. So thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in to PNM TV. Good evening.